All right, now it's recording. Okay, so now we're recording. This is internal purposes, so the fact that I missed some of it's no big deal. All right, so we've talked about earning items, and that's pretty clear cut, really. If I do new, you decide what you want. We'd pick an earning item, and we'd pick what type: salary, fixed amount, like a bonus, or an hourly rate, pay type, account ID. Put in earning items to meet every earning opportunity offered in your company. So if you have some kind of sales contest and you give a $100 bill out, make sure it's covered. If you pay people an hourly wage to clean the warehouse, make sure you have something in there for that. Your next step is to create your liabilities and your taxes. So let's talk about taxes first. All of us pay taxes. So when you look at your pay stub, you will notice that your company, the company you work for, took money out of your check. And they are supposed to pass it on to the government. And these are the different monies that they took out of your check. So the first one they took out of your check was called FIT, Federal Income Tax. They took that money out of your check because the government ordered them to do that. And if they don't, they're in big trouble. And what they're supposed to do is take that money out of your check, and they're supposed to immediately give it to the Internal Revenue Service. And so this is how you set it up. The tax calculation type is federal, right there. The tax name, FIT. The description. Notice some of these things can't be edited later. The vendor, who do you give the money to? So you have to give this money to a vendor. They need to be in your vendor list right here, right? So we have to find internal revenue. Internal revenue needs to be in here. Whoever we have to pass the money on to, that's the vendor we pick. Now, if we take money out of your check for a moment in time, it is an accounts payable. It's an accounts payable, meaning I owe somebody money. Just like for a credit card or a bank loan, if I take $100 out of Tim's check, it's not a $100 asset to me. It's not $100 in income to me. It's a $100 liability. It's a liability to me. And that means it's a accounts payable. And I have to pick the accounts payable from this list. And you'll notice I have one called federal withholding, and the type is other current liability. That is coming from your chart of accounts right here. So if we go in and search for the word federal, we should find federal withholding taxes payable. And there it is. That's what we set up. And that's a liability because I owe the IRS that money. Now, we'll go to a balance sheet and I'll show it to you. A balance sheet shows you how much stuff you have and how much stuff you owe people, assets and liabilities, and whatever's left over. So if you look at the balance sheet, you'll notice we have liabilities right here. We have accounts payable. We have employee insurance. We have this one. We just talked about it. Federal withholding, taxes payable. That is not my money. Now, where did I get the money? I took it from you. I took it out of your check, and you didn't have a choice, and neither did I. It's like the mafia told us to do it. We don't have a choice. I took it from you. Why? Because I had to. And I have to pass it on to them. So it came out of your check, and I pass it on to them. That's why it's a withholding from you, taxes payable. So that's how the software knows about it. And when you put this on the employee and you process their paycheck, you don't have to think about any of this. You don't have to think about any of this. None of this has to be thought about because the software is taking care of it. And if the government, the federal government, changes their rules on all of this, you don't have to worry about that either because we keep up with that and we change the rules. And then when you go to update the software, you'll notice in our revision notes that we have updated the payroll. So if you look through here, you'll occasionally see, among other things, payroll updates. And I haven't seen any yet, but they would be in here. Oh, payroll. Okay, so there's payroll. And we keep that updated. So we update all your payroll, make sure that those tables are all up to date so you don't have to bother with that. You don't have to worry about it. All right, so now that we set up our taxes, we have federal income tax, we have FICA Medicare, that's to pay your health insurance when you're old. And we have FICA Social Security, that's to pay you money when you're old because the government knows damn well Americans aren't going to save any money. So this is your safety net. That's to pay for your Medicaid, your government health insurance when you're old, and your Social Security to help provide living expenses when you're old. And the software takes care of that automatically too. So then we have the state. We have Kansas. I set up Wisconsin, Virginia, New Mexico. We have states in here too, because the state basically has the same rule. They want money out of your check, and they want us to give it to them. Give it to who? Give it to a vendor called Kansas Department of Revenue. All right. So when I do that, it's a liability. If I owe somebody money, it's a liability, and that liability needs to go to my balance sheet. Where on my balance sheet do you want to show it? I want to create something called state withholding tax, other current liability. And so you create something called state withholding tax. Now, you could just have withholding tax, federal and state could all be included, but I chose to break it out. And we'll help you with this. If you purchase training from RA Tax and Accounting or from Aptora, we'll walk you through this. We'll set all this up for you. Doesn't matter if it's QuickBooks or Mass 90 or Total Office Manager, you got to set all this up. Every software has to have this. The good news is, though, again, once you do it, you're done. It's over. So that's the state. So let's do a state together. I'm going to right click, do new what? I'm going to do a new tax item right there. All right. You've enabled the payroll service option. Do you still want to do this? Yes. I was showing somebody the payroll service where you don't do payroll in the software. So tax calculation type. Well, I just said we were going to do a state together, right? You get to make your own here if you want to, but we're going to do a state. Now that we've picked state, we're going to hit the find button and we're going to go find Missouri. There is Missouri right there. Now, Missouri has two. They had the earned income credit, which was dropped, as we can see. And they have their Missouri tax, Missouri income tax, right there. That's what I wanted. Thankfully, that's what I wanted because that's all I got. But that's all Missouri has for us. So I'll hit select. And now I pick the vendor, and they probably aren't in here. I'll start typing in Missouri. I don't have them. So you type in Missouri and find Missouri. That's the company that, or pardon me, that's the vendor, in this case, state government, we're sending the money to. And then that's going to show up on your balance sheet. So you're going to go pick that other current liability we talked about. It's not an asset. Other current liability, what? Insurance? No. Federal withholding? No. It's going to be state withholding. There it is. We pick it. And now we're ready to hit OK, and that's it. That's all there is to it. Now, what if we wanted to do a local? Let's pick local and hit find. Local would be counties. So now let's go back to Missouri. Now, in the state of Missouri, there's a city called Kansas City, Missouri. There's a city called St. Louis. Of course, we know that, right? We're local. So remember, the calculation type is no longer state, it's local. But the first thing it wants to know is what state are we talking about? And then it would say, here are your options. EIC dropped. Kansas City, well, they have an earnings tax there. St. Louis, they have an earnings tax too. So it's an extra little tax because you live in Kansas City, Missouri, or St. Louis. And if that's what you're looking for, just hit select. And again, the software knows all the math. It knows all the math. And how does it know that? Well, if you were to get on the internet and search Kansas City, Missouri tax withholding tables, then you'll find pages like this that have tables. And it tells you how much money to take out. And then you'll find pages like this, which show you what to do. It shows you the math, how much to take out, etc. You don't have to worry about any of that because we did. We did it for you. So all of that math is built into our software and we keep it updated, and that's part of what you're paying for with support because it cost us a lot of money to do all that. Not to mention to keep up with laws and rules and all the other things that have to go with it that are in addition to the math. All right, so once that's done and you've created all of your taxes that apply to your state, and what are they? What are the taxes? Well, that's not a question for Aptora. So Aptora is not really the company that you'd ask, hey, how many taxes do I have to have? You'd have to talk to your accountant. And that accountant could be our sister company, RA Tax and Accounting. If you don't like your accountant, hire them. Your accountant doesn't have to work down the street anymore. There's this thing called the internet, right? I mean, even long distance is free these days. So you could get on the internet and have a relationship with an accountant. How many times do you have to see your accountant face to face? How many times do you have to look at them in the face, in person? Not very often, right? Many of us haven't seen our accountant in years. We talk to them, but we don't look at them face to face. So you could hire a good accounting firm like RA Tax and Accounting and let them help you with all this and a lot more. But this is a question for your accountant, not for Aptora. We're not your accountant. Just like we wouldn't be your lawyer. And I'm not being facetious. We're not your lawyer either, right? We're not your accountant, doctor, or lawyer. Those are professionals that have their job to do, and we're not that. What we're here for is to explain what the fields mean, but we wouldn't want to tell you what to put in them. That's really a conversation for your accountant. And it isn't that I don't want to talk about it. I love this stuff, but I'm not your doctor. I'm not your lawyer. I'm not your accountant, right? So that's why if you met a doctor on the street, they're very reluctant to answer your questions. They say, well, you need to talk to your doctor about that. Your lawyer says the same thing. You meet a lawyer on the street, they say, well, you really need to talk to your lawyer about that. It isn't that they necessarily don't want to talk to you. It's just that there's a lot of questions that might have to be asked, and your doctor knows you. Hopefully your accountant knows you. By the way, if your accountant doesn't know you, there's a good reason to switch accountants. Your accountant should know you like your doctor does. After your taxes are set up, then you have to create your company's liability. So I want to talk about this here real quick. And I want to make sure everybody understands it. When you take money out of somebody's check, very often you, the employer, are supposed to match it. So I took $100 out of Tim's check. In many cases, I'm supposed to match the 100 myself. So the money I took out of his check was called a tax. That's his problem. I took it out of his check, so it didn't cost me any money at all. I took it from him. So it's like the mafia told me to steal $100 from him. Why should I? If you don't, we'll put you in jail for the rest of your life. Oh, okay, I'm convinced I will. So I took his $100, but now the mafia says, we want you to match that $100. Why should I? Because you'll go to jail if you don't. How's that sound? Okay. So the software will help me keep track of that. And it does that by you creating liabilities. So for example, when I take money out of your check for Medicare, I have to match it. So we get money from you and we give it to the government, and then we match that amount and give it to the government. And so those are your liabilities. And to create liabilities, you right-click, go to New. New what? New liability. Employer liability item. Well, what kind? Federal or state. So we'll do state. Hit find. We'll pick a state. Any state. Wisconsin. So Wisconsin has unemployment and some new special assessment. Oh, it got dropped. So we said it was dropped. Now you don't have to worry about it. Eventually that thing will disappear when everybody's forgot what it is, but we don't want you thinking we forgot it. So we include it, but we say drop so you don't think we forgot about it. But I got unemployment. Now I'll select unemployment. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, I will start paying unemployment automatically. So payroll setup is difficult. It's time consuming. I mean, it's not real difficult. Depends on your skill level. I'll call it difficult. I like to make it sound as bad as it could be. It's difficult. It's horrible. It's the worst thing you'll ever go through in your life. And then once it's set up, it's done. It's over. The only thing you'd have to do is add something someday. Maybe there's some new tax or whatever. It's rare. Or you might come up with some new benefit that your company offers. Any questions on any of this so far? All right. So now we start thinking about benefits, things that we give you, like time off. So down here, we decide, you know what, we're going to pay you sick time. If you get sick, we're going to pay you for being sick. So we'll set that up. Now I already have it here. But we have this thing called sick time, and we could just call it paid time off. And it's for whatever. You don't have to be sick. Maybe you have to get your license plate for your car. But here's where I set it up. So number one, this costs me money, doesn't it? If I'm going to pay you money to go get a license plate for your car, or pay you money to sit at home because you're sick, that costs me money. And that's going to show up on the balance sheet? No, income statement. Because it's an expense. And how do I know where to put it? Right there. So on my income statement, you remember seeing salaries and wages? And there's a thing called sick time. If I give you $1 for sick time, and you run the income statement, you're going to see $1 on the line item called sick time. Now, I'm going to decide how many hours I want to give you for sick time. And I can change this by employee. But I could also put in a default here. So I might say that hours are accrued at the beginning of the calendar year, and maybe that's going to be 80 hours. Or it could be every paycheck. And every paycheck, maybe I pay you 52 times a year. So I want to divide 80 by 52. 80 divided by 52 equals. So I can actually, no, 52 divided by 80. Yeah, there we go. So now I'm going to give you 65 hundredths of an hour every paycheck. And that's going to go into a savings account, a bucket, not a real savings account, a bucket, if you will. It's going to go into a temporary bucket, and you get to draw from it whenever you're sick. And I might say you can draw from that, or you can add to that up to 120 hours. At 120 hours, that's enough. I'm not giving you any more than that. So I'm going to pay you every week. Every week you're going to get 0.65 of an hour, 65 hundredths of an hour, up to 120 hours. You'll never get more than that. And in fact, on your anniversary, I could clear it. I could reset the 120 hours. Or I could reset it at the beginning of the year. So at the beginning of the year, you're going to lose all your sick time. Or I could say, I'm never going to reset it. I'm never going to give you more than 120 though. But you're never going to lose it. So that's how you set up sick time. You do the same thing for vacation time if they're different. You might set up sick time for the office if it's different. You might have sick time for your salespeople that's different from your office people. You might have sick time that's different for people that have been here a year, 2 years, 3 years, or 5 years. Same way with vacation. You could even create a tool allowance. I'm not going to get into that. There's a help topic for it. But it's very common in the contracting world to pay you a little bit of money per hour. So for example, I guess I will get into it real quick. Most contractors require you to provide your own basic tools. They provide the expensive or unusual stuff. But most contractors, when they hire a technician or an installer, that person has to have their own pliers, screwdrivers, sheet metal cutters, etc. But they have a legitimate gripe by saying, look, I'm breaking my tools working here. Can you pay me back when I break a tool? No, I don't want to pay you back when you break a tool, because how do I know you didn't abuse the tool? But I will tell you this, I'll give you 30 cents an hour, and I'll put the 30 cents an hour into a tool allowance account, and that's what I'll use to replace your tools or buy you tools. So whenever you want a tool, look at your pay stub to see how much money you have in your tool allowance, and then buy tools, replace tools whenever you want to. I don't want the money. I don't want to keep it. It's your money. But I just don't want it to be a blank check. And it'll never reset. So that money could get really big. And I'll tell you what, I'll make you another deal. If you don't use it and you ever quit for some reason, I'll just give you the money. So you don't even have to use the money up. I'll give it back to you. And then you'd write that in your company policy manual, Someone might say, well, what does Aptora recommend? I don't really want to recommend anything. I just don't feel like I'm in a position to recommend something. I'm not your consultant, your business advisor. I might want to do that for a living someday, but I'm really not that person. So I don't feel comfortable. I can tell you what all this means, and this is for you RA people, and this also is for you support people. RA Tax might be their advisor. Tiffany, Erica might be their advisor, but most of us wouldn't be. So you guys in tech support, and this is why I'm glad when you guys come to this, that's your out. You say, look, I can explain what all this means, but I really don't want to give you any advice. And my boss doesn't either. I'm not comfortable because I'm not your business consultant. Well, what do other people do? I typically don't find out. Most people don't share that with me. So it's not like I'm exposed to a situation where people tell me what they do a lot. I don't hear it a lot, so I don't have an answer to that either. Now, if you had an answer, you could give it to them if you want. If you did know, if lots of people told you how they do things, it's okay for you to say it. But just make sure you're not their consultant. You say that, I'm not your business advisor, but to answer your question, I've had about 3 people tell me that they pay 25 cents an hour. And if the person quits, they keep the money. The employer keeps the money. That could be your answer. Any questions on anything so far? So you guys, Tim, this is for you, and Jonathan. This is what we're talking about when we tell people how important training is. Because this is good stuff, isn't it? I mean, you guys are thinking, I wish you would have started recording this at the beginning. I wish I would have written that down, or this isn't that hard. It isn't that hard when you have somebody showing you the rooms of the building. That's the metaphor I like to use. It's not hard to take you to room 534 and show you around and tell you what that room is for. It's not hard. It just takes a while. And you can't ask tech support to do that. And that's a metaphor you can use in tech support, Josh and Dalen, and you can pass it on. It's not hard. It just takes a lot of time. And that's not tech support. Tech support is after you've been to the room, you've had the room explained to you, but you got this one question. You forgot. What does it mean on max accrued? What is that again? Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry I bothered you. All right. I should have known that. Never. Okay. Thank you. Bye. And that was a happy call. That was a short call, happy call. They're not mad at you. Nobody's angry. You had the answer. Life is good. The job is good. The job sucks when they call you and say, yeah, the boss wants me to set up payroll. It's 10:57. I'm supposed to be done with this before I go home tonight, and I got to leave early because I got to pick my kid up from basketball practice. Now, where do I start? That sucks, but that's not your job. What your job is to explain rooms that they've already visited. And if you have all the answers, your job is easy. It may be monotonous. So those of you at RA, those of you at Aptora, if you're answering these questions, I'm not saying it isn't monotonous. And it could even be boring, but it sure as hell ain't hard. It shouldn't be hard. It should be just so easy. But it's all training. You guys need training too. All right, so that's the tool allowance. That's how to set it up. Total Office Manager allows you to do that. A lot of software doesn't. Tool allowance is quite a great thing, really. We don't get into it too many times in demos. Now, you have deductions. This is money that I take out of your check for some reason. So like, for example, I might say to you, hey, Tim, I'm going to pay for your health insurance. It's $1,000 a month, and I'd like you to pay, $250 of it. And Tim says, okay, I'll take it. Now, how do I take care of all that? Well, I sign up for health insurance and I tell the health insurance company, I got this guy named Tim. I want to give him health insurance. And they say, well, that's $1,000 a month. You ready to give that money to us? And I say, sure. And then I get a bill every month for $1,000. But I've asked Tim to pay part of it. And so I need the software to take $250 out of his check and give it to me. I'm not passing it on to anybody, by the way. I'm keeping it because that's the deal we have. I'll buy you health insurance and you give me $250 a month. How's that sound? I'll take it. So that's how the deduction types come in. It's just money that I deduct. Any reason at all. I might deduct money because you have a garnishment. So the state of Missouri's called me and said, hey, you made yourself a bunch of kids with a lady and left her, and you better pay her. And that's called child support, Buster. And we've ordered your employer to take that money from you. So what I might do is create a deduction item for that. It's not the same thing as a tax. It's not a tax, right? So don't be confused. It's a deduction. So I'm supposed to take money out of your check, and then me as a company, I'm supposed to pay it like I'm paying a light bill, like I'm paying the internet. So it's easy to set these up, but you do need an accountant's help because, again, this is for you tech support people. They might say to you, yeah, I'm ready to get this set up here. Just got a few questions. Should I deduct my health insurance from gross pay? I can't answer that. What the hell do you mean you can't answer that? And you know what to say, right? I'm not familiar with your state, your tax situation. I really can't advise you. I can define gross pay for you if you'd like. I know what the hell gross pay is. I don't need you telling me that. Well, I'm sorry. I mean, I know it's stressful because you got to get this set up, but I'm not your accountant and I'm not your business consultant. I can tell you what gross pay means, but I can't tell you if it should be gross pay. I have no way of knowing that. Well, can you find out? You know what? I probably could, but I'm not going to because I don't work there. I'm not your consultant. I'm not your accountant. Please talk to your accountant about that because if something goes wrong, I want you to call your accountant and tell them it went wrong because they're the ones that are going to fix it. I don't want to be responsible for giving you the wrong answer. Well, that's just bullshit. And you might hear that, right? But you did your job. But your job was easy because you didn't have to get into that. Your job was to just simply know what gross pay was. That's it. Now, what about what vendor to pick? Yeah, you can explain that. That's who we pay money to, right? Account ID. Well, this is a cost to us, isn't it? So we have to pay money, right? So if we have to pay money, that's an expense. That needs to go on our income statement. And that's going to go under employee insurance. What kind of insurance? You could just have employee insurance if you wanted to. But maybe managers want to see a breakout. I do personally. So I want to see health, dental, and vision. I want to know if any of these are going up. And I want to know what rate they're going up. And they may go up at a different rate. So I want them broken out. Now, it's okay at this point to say, I can't really advise you on whether or not to break them out, but I will tell you we do that at Aptora because for whatever reason, the boss, James, and he's really into this kind of stuff, as you probably know, he wants them broken out. So for whatever it's worth, he wants them broken out. So you think I should? No, I don't know if you should. I can't answer that because I don't run the company, but I'm just saying my boss does. And he knows what he's doing. So maybe you might want to as well. I don't know. But you see how part of this training is teaching you guys how to address things. I'm trying to make it a little easier. And I hope to God you're able to hear me because, of course, I can't see you. And I'm thinking all this is really valuable. And I'm just thinking, wow, I hope they hear this because I'm hoping it'll make your job easier. Now, you guys at RA Tax, You may be in a position where you are supposed to answer it because you're getting paid to answer it. And that's different. That's different. All right, so that's how we set it up. Now, qualifying FICA wage reduction, is it? You tell me, I don't know. Qualifying federal unemployment tax, FUTA reduction? Is it? I gotta know. My boss wants this set up right away. I can't tell you. I can't tell you. Well, who there can find out? Who there knows? Nobody. Because we're not your accountant. We just can't advise you. Keep in mind, I can tell you what it is. I can help you figure it out. We can look it up together on Google. We can read it together if you want. I mean, I'm not really supposed to do that, but I don't mind. But I can't tell you what to do with it. I'm just not allowed to do that. That's your accountant. Tax tracking? What does all this mean? Well, there's a help topic, I believe, on support. I haven't gone to look. There's a help topic out there that'll explain it all, and we can Google it together. But again, that's your accountant. Now, here's the good news, though. Once you set this up, you're done. So it should be a fairly short conversation with your accountant. And all of this is the same thing in QuickBooks, by the way. So if you came from QuickBooks, it's going to be easier. We probably set it up for you. When Josh did your migration, it should have all been in there already. Just look at your old one. Go to QuickBooks and look at it. Talk to your accountant. Your accountant knows QuickBooks, I'm sure. So it's all the same. So your job is to tell them what this means, but you can't tell them when to use it or why or if. All right, so that's deductions. As I said, you can have deductions for dental, vision, 401k. We have that here at Aptora, right? All of these. Child support. Every once in a while, we have to pay child support on behalf of an employee. That's a court order. We do it or go to jail, by the way. That helps keep track of it. So those are your deductions. So the only thing we haven't talked about is addition. Any questions on deductions? No? All right. Let's talk about additions. It's easy. I don't like additions, by the way. I don't like to use them. Just FYI. And I'll tell you why here in a second. So an addition is another way to get money on someone's paycheck. So for example, you went to the hardware store and you bought some tools for Aptora. And I told you I'd pay you back. You did not have a company credit card. So you went up there and you bought tools and you turned in a receipt and you want to get paid back. I could have a reimbursement addition type. And then when I go to process your paycheck, I could add $50 to your paycheck to reimburse you for tools. It's easy to do. So you just open up the paycheck. I won't show it to you, but you open up the paycheck before you print it. And you just add $50. And that's that. You'll get your $50 back. But I don't like that because I don't want to mix payroll with regular bookkeeping. So what I'd rather do is I'd rather come here and write you a plain old check. So I would put you in a check. You know, I can come in here and find an employee, right? So we have customers, vendors, employees, they're all in here. I'd go find you in this list and I'd write you a check for $50. I'd pick the correct expense account. I'd put in a memo explaining why, and I've got ample opportunity to memo this, right? So I can put in lots of notes, and that's way better bookkeeping. So I don't like the idea of reimbursing you for hotels, meals, mileage, tools, you name it, whatever it is. I don't like the idea of reimbursing you on a paycheck because it's confusing. It could be confusing. I'd rather write a check for that. So none of you probably should have additions. Now in tech support, So let me say this real fast, and I do appreciate your questions. I want them. Let me say this real fast in tech support, because I really want to help you tech support people. In tech support, somebody might ask you, should I use additions or not? And you might be tempted to say, I'm not your accountant. And you could. And that's your easy out. Go right ahead if you want to. But in this case, you're not really giving them accounting advice. So you could say, hey, this isn't really accounting advice. So I'll tell you, my boss, when we trained, and people want to hear you were trained, by the way. So you can say, when my boss, the owner here, James, when he trained us on this, and we just covered this recently, he says he doesn't like these at all. Now, of course, you're free to do what you want, and I'll explain what they do, but he wants to see you write a check because there's no income tax implications on this, and he doesn't want to see it on a paycheck. So you're welcome to say that if you want, because it's not accounting at all. But you're also more than welcome to say, I can explain what this is, but I can't advise you on whether or not you should use that. Tim, go ahead with your question.
Well, on the additions, I think you just answered this, but I want to make sure. If you add an addition to your paycheck, it's not going to be calculated with taxes taken out of it.
Correct. And I'm sorry, I thought you were Tim. Yeah, I thought you were Tim. Sorry, Josh. Yes, that's correct. So let's take a look at a deduction, and you'll notice it wants to know all about your taxes down here, right? So it's looking at your taxes, and it will affect your taxes for sure. But when it comes to additions, they have zero tax implication. They do not affect your paycheck in the slightest, except it's money being added. But it's not income, and it won't be taxed. So it's not taxable income. It has no effect.
Nice.
So good question. And I want those kinds of questions because that's a good one.
Well, thank you for explaining it.
Yep. So that is, and it's 11:11. So we've covered a lot here in 41 minutes, because I've only been in payroll for about 25 minutes. If you had some basic knowledge of accounting software, basic knowledge of payroll, this was probably enough training for you to get started on setting up your payroll, isn't it? You've had enough training. Because remember, training is way more effective when you have some basic info, when you have some basic experience. And you don't have to, it's okay. But if you have some basic info, knowledge, experience, we'll train you pretty quickly. But if you have people coming to our training that have not done any of this kind of work, please give them a break. Give them more time, let them have more time, buy more hours, because it's not fair for them to absorb all this quickly. So that's your payroll items list. And at some point you're done. You've got them finished. And then if we go back to here, we have several things that we don't really have to do. Optionally, you could create a list of Optionally, you could create a list of employee types for reporting purposes. You might say, for example, we have full-time people, we have part-time people, we have seasonal people. All right, so let's do that. Let's add seasonal. So there's seasonal. What is that for? Well, we could get into it more later, but it allows you to classify people for reporting purposes. So there's seasonal. You don't have to, though, right now. Let's go back and look around. We did payroll items. We could create templates. So what you could do is you could create a template for all your employees. And I won't at this moment, but that allows you to set up your employees a lot faster. So remember, this stuff doesn't have to be addressed right now. We could create a pay group list. So when you go to pay your people, you could pay them one group at a time. You don't need it, don't bother with it. But you might want to pay your hourly people first. Or maybe that's somebody's job. That's Josh's job. But Tim is supposed to pay the salaried people. And then Dalen, his job is to pay the salespeople. And maybe Aubrey, her job is to pay sales commissions on people. So I might find that useful, but you don't need it. But that's an example of Tom, total office manager, being powerful, 585 rooms. But don't let that bum you out. It shouldn't mean it's sad. You shouldn't be sad. You should be happy. Try to outgrow this thing. All right, so we'll go back here. Pay frequency. How often do you pay people? It might be just every 2 weeks, but if you have different pay frequencies, it's helpful to put those in here just to keep yourself organized. But you don't have to.
Quick question again.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Yeah.
On the pay groups, is that for when you're going to process payroll? You can just select that group, and anyone that has that pay group set up in their employee list, it just automatically adds all those employees to that list?
Yes. So everybody's done their timesheets that gets paid by the hour. Salary people are already set up. At some point, I'm going to process pay group. So this form opens, and I find them.
Okay. I thought that was the case. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. So that's just to stay organized. Otherwise, it's just going to dump everybody in here, and that's fine. Let it do that. But if you want to get organized, that's an option.
Nice.
So one thing about Total Office Manager for all of you is we get blamed for being too complicated, too complex, convoluted, hodgepodge of features that make no sense. It's a big building with a lot of rooms. You can sleep in one room if you want to and eat in one other. But you've got 583 other ones that you can grow into. Why is that a bad thing? You just make it a bad thing. You don't have to dwell on it. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to use it. That happens in support a lot, so hopefully that helps with support. Now, let's go back to this list real quick. There is some weird things in here. Ethnicity. Really? I'm supposed to record the fact that you're black, white, Latino, Asian? Really? Well, that is there because of a feature that I turned on called Certified Payroll. So if we go to Preferences, Payroll, if I turn on Certified Payroll, then certain features get exposed, and that's some of them. Ethnicity, class, their classification, like master mechanic or journeyman, certified payroll letters. Those things otherwise don't show up because when you fill out certified payroll reports, you're sending them to state, local, and federal governments, and they want to know how much you're paying the white people and how much do you pay the black people and how much do you pay Latinos, because the government has reports on that. And you might watch the news and it might say, wage growth for black people hasn't improved much. They don't say that because you're not supposed to say black people anymore. They say, wage growth for white people has gone up a lot, but for African Americans, it hasn't. How do they know such a thing? Because of reports that come from companies, and they require you to put in the ethnicity. So otherwise, you wouldn't see those. Workers' comp, as you probably know, workers' compensation is insurance if you get hurt. So if you get hurt on the job, then we have to pay you workers' comp. But that could be a lot of money. So we buy insurance for that. So we actually go out to an insurance company and say, we want to buy workers' compensation insurance. And the company says, well, before I can tell you how much money that's going to cost you, I need to know some things. How many employees do you have? What do they do for a living there? Well, I have installers. They install furnaces. I have clerical people. They do bookkeeping for us. I have salespeople. So you put in workers' compensation codes to identify the different roles within your company, because an installer is more likely to cut his finger than a salesperson. A sheet metal worker, somebody that bends sheet metal all day long, is more likely than the installer to cut their finger. So the workers' compensation costs change based on what they do for a living. Most software doesn't even have this feature. And here's where it comes into play. When you enter a timesheet for an employee, it can automatically put in their workers' comp code for you. And you don't want to misclassify them, otherwise you're going to overpay for insurance. Now, what it'll do is it'll automatically fill that out for you when you go to enter their timesheet. And this time it didn't. That's because I obviously didn't set up a default. So when you go to set up your employees and you go into payroll items, you can set up a default workers' comp code. But suppose that this person, Bob Gunderson, he's our plumber, and we don't have a lot of work for him today. So he's going to spend Thursday and Friday remodeling our bathroom. Well, then the workers' comp code is installation. But let's say we've asked him to stay in the office. We don't have any work for you, but Stephanie needs your help with direct mail. I know it's not fun, so I'll give you a choice. Go help Stephanie stuff envelopes and stamp envelopes, or go home. And you won't get paid, or you can take paid time off. I'll go help Stephanie stuff envelopes. Can I wear a headset and listen to music? Sure. Go right ahead. So he runs over to Stephanie's office and stuffs envelopes. I want to put him in a timesheet, but I want to call that clerical. So when I go to print my workers' comp reports, and we have those, I don't overpay. I report it properly. Most software doesn't have that. That's not sexy. Service Titan would never demo this. They don't have it. They'll never have it. They could give a shit about that. They don't care because it's not going to sell them software. But we're idiots. We care. We care about the software, so we add features that won't sell software. Why? Because we're stupid. But that's good for you, the user, because that saves money. That's real. That's a real thing that really saves you money. That has a return on investment right there. But you won't find it in our sales brochure. When I do this training, this is usually the time where I say, this software kicks ass. It really does. And if you don't think so, you haven't spent enough time with me. This software kicks ass because we pay attention to things that don't help us sell any software. Why? Because we have a conscience, because we're professionals. A professional cabinet maker who builds a beautiful dresser using only the finest wood. Are you with me? Are you picturing that? I want you to picture that. Picture a beautiful piece of furniture made by a master furniture maker. Only the finest wood and stain. And that cabinet is pushed up against your wall, and it's beautiful. Are you with me? Picture that. Now, pull the cabinet out from the wall and turn it around and look at the back of it. Do you picture a cheap piece of wood that hasn't been stained? No. You picture a fine piece of wood that no one would ever see, beautifully stained like the rest of it. Why? Because I just told you it's a master cabinet maker. a person with tremendous pride. They're not going to take a cheap piece of wood and put it in the back of the cabinet thinking they could get away with it. Well, that's us. We're that cabinet maker. And are we perfect? No. Are we striving for it? I know I am. When I get off this phone, I'm going to be asking about software, bugs, features, things like that, and we're going to be working on perfecting it. That's what you get when you invest in Total Office Manager from Aptora. It's not just a sales pitch with a slick demo. When you go to check for an update, you'll notice that a lot of these updates are little tweaks and fixes. Nothing major. We've gotten way better on our updates, by the way, all of you know it. We're no longer rushing updates out because something's broken and we've screwed something up. A lot of this is just fine-tuning, tweaks, little things. If there's a ticket number, it's usually somebody suggested something. Some customer had a better way of doing it or found a minor little problem. And at Aptora, the nice thing about dealing with us is the tech support department has a direct connection to programming and a direct connection to the owner. So stuff gets done. Stuff gets done because tech support has power. They have the power to get things done. So if you read through these release notes, you'll notice a lot of fine tuning. That's what we're constantly doing, is fine tuning. All right, so let me give you an example of fine tuning and then we'll wrap this up. Let's go to our customer list. And let's go find somebody. 8877. And so there's James Leichter. All right, there's me. Let's open me up. Oh, past due. Oh, past due. Oh, deadbeat. This is a deadbeat dad. This guy's terrible. All right, so here I am in his record right there. Now, we go to the Contacts tab. This is a really handy feature, the Contacts tab. And this is what I'm going to end with, just to show you some fine-tuning here. In the Contacts tab, we have the ability to put in all of the people at this business or this house. So it could be Aptora, right? And then we could put all the employees we've met in here. And that'd be a good idea. But it could be a household. And James called in and mentioned that his daughter was going to be there and she'd pay the bill. And so I would put in Jessica Leichter, and I'd put in her title. And title could be daughter, son. It's a user-defined list, right? So we put in daughter. Now we know the daughter. Now we know the son. Now we know the wife. Now we know the mother-in-law. There's a mother-in-law there? Well, let's get her name in there too. So it's a really handy place to put that information. And we've got, as you know, phone number, cell phone, all that. We saw this earlier. I wanted to point out a couple things here that maybe people don't know. Let's go to menu. There's preferences on what columns to show here. So if you want middle initial, you can have it. You want salutation like Mr. Mrs., you can have it. You don't see any use for alt phone, get rid of it. You don't see a use for pager. Nobody's using a pager anymore. Get rid of it. But it could be a doctor that has a pager, right? They still use them. So it has its own preferences. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is you can decide, do you want to use, let's go back there real quick. You can use their first name right there, first name, last name, or name. Notice I turn name off. So name is a single field. I broke out first name and last name. And you notice that I don't use uppercase, right, like that. I don't do that. Now, here's the reason. Someday you might want to use this information in marketing, and you'll do a mail merge, and you don't want it to say Dear Tim. or Dear Tim Smith. So that'll happen, though, if you have a single name field, because you're going to do a mail merge using the name field. And now it's going to be Dear Tim Smith. And you might end the letter by saying, so, Tim Smith, uppercase, right? You're yelling, right? So, Tim Smith. So you don't want that. What you want is, so, Tim, Dear Tim. Now, Total Office Manager does something that most software just doesn't bother with. There's a first name and a last name field. So you have better marketing. And we also have a pronunciation field. We thought of this long before Apple did. I've noticed Apple phones now have that in their contacts. We thought about that long before Apple did. So how do you pronounce this guy's name? You don't want to say, hi, Mr. Lickster. Thanks for calling. Or, did I get that right, Mr. Lickster? That way you can pronounce it properly. Did I get that right, Mr. Lichter? Contacts tab. Yeah, my daughter will be there and she'll pay the bill as usual. Okay, that's Jessica, right? Yeah. You have a good memory. No, just good software. So that's why that's there, and that's why those are separated. And then finally, we've added a purchasing role. You salespeople, hopefully you're still there. This is good for you. This is good for Stephanie. This is important for businesses. We want to know, what is your purchasing role? So if we put you in as a sales lead, or even after we've made the sale, we really want to know what your purchasing role is. And these are hard-coded, meaning you don't get to change them. There's the gatekeeper, blocker, the buyer, the champion. There's the decision maker. There's the self-proclaimed decision maker. That's the phony. That's the person that tells you that they are the decision maker, but they're not. There's the influencer, the initiator. Yeah, I'm just calling to get info for the boss. Who's the boss? That's going to be the decision maker. But there could be many. Now, if you go out on the internet and you look around at how to identify gatekeepers, decision makers, influencers, and blockers, you'll see the internet's full of this concept. We didn't make it up. So there they are. There's a whole spreadsheet or table on them. There's the approver, and there's the decision maker, and the influencer, and there's the evaluator, the recommender, the gatekeeper or the blocker, the users. There's people that have nothing to do with any of this, but they use the product, but they don't pick it. They don't decide anything. There's the champion. We have those, right? We have some champions out there that just love our software, and they keep recommending it to people, and we use them as references. And then there's the mentor, like Gary Ellis, for example. So we have those. The whole internet's full of these people, right? So again, it wasn't us that thought of this, but we have them built in. So now you can start identifying who these people are so that you can tailor your marketing and your sales efforts to that person.
James, this is so embarrassing. I've never seen this before. I think it's not, I have to go to my preferences, but this is really important.
It is.
I've never seen it.
It's awesome, but don't feel too bad because it's pretty recent.
Ah, okay.
It came out in version 19.11.6. And by the way, if you don't know how to read our version numbers, that was the 6th day of the 11th month of the 19th year. So November 6th, 2019, that feature came out. So it's pretty darn new. But that's the fine tuning. Look, this is what I'll leave you guys with, because I really want you to feel like you represent one hell of a good piece of software. Why did we add that? We didn't need to. It made no difference on 2019 sales. We're having a record sales year. Do you think we needed to add purchasing role after a record sales year? Not a chance. But we did because it's the right thing to do. It's a good feature. It'll help people. Why didn't we think of it 10 years ago? I don't know. Honestly, we probably should have. But there's no time like today. But most software doesn't think like that. That doesn't make it hard to use either. And that's where we get blamed, I think, unfairly. Oh, this damn thing's so hard to use. You come in here, there's first name, last name, purchasing. Look at all this shit. My last software didn't have this. That's okay. Ignore it. Get rid of it. The boss can always come into menu and go to preferences and get rid of all of it. Then it's not easy. Then it's not hard to use, is it? Because it's not there anymore. Now it's easy. But that's not what you want, is it? And that's what we talk about that letter, Stephanie, right? You want easy? I just take stuff away from you. That's easy. Now you got easy software. I'll just get rid of the contacts tab altogether. And you have to admit that would make it easier, wouldn't it? But that's not really what you want, is it? That's not what our users want. Don't let them confuse easy with easy to use and simple. Those are all different things. Any final questions or comments?
No, on one of the maybe I don't know, whenever we have time on our next training, if possible, if we could go over performance-based compensation.
Yes, so I'm glad you said that. So the next meetings we'll have, and it may not be the next product meeting, I'm not sure. I did this because Roger couldn't come, and this didn't apply to Canada. But the next meeting is going to be going over the sales commission system here, and then go into the employees and go through payroll setup. So this is the next step to our payroll training. Performance-based comp, all the sales commission methods. Then let's go to an employee and set up all of these. And it isn't that hard because we did all the hard work already. We have all the earnings, deductions, taxes, time off, liabilities, tax info. We just have to add that to the employee and fine tune it for their particular circumstances, but that's the next part of payroll training. And then finally, before the end of the year, I hope to do payroll reports. And again, this is going to be so helpful because you're going to be on the phone with somebody. I don't care if you're RA Tax, Aptora Support, Aptora Sales. You will say, damn, James just taught me this. I'm glad I came because it's the end of the year and the beginning of the year is coming and you'll be covering this. All right. So I'm trying to make the job easier, by the way, for all of you. This training, it makes it easy. It makes it easy because the more you know, the easier the job gets. Any final questions or comments?
Nope.
All right. Thanks a lot. I appreciate everybody being here.
Thanks, Jim. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Bye.